It's currently Pride Month, so I really wanted to sew my own Pride merch that fit more into my aesthetic than the commercial pieces I often see. Not to say they're bad in any sort of way, they just often tend to be white or black t-shirts with some sort of print on them, and I don't wear white or black t-shirts. So the only way of getting a Pride piece that I'll actually wear is by making it myself. Inspiration wise, I really wanted to go for like a 60s space age sort of fashion, because Pride definitely represents moving towards a more equal future, and I feel like a futuristic look kind of goes with that sort of aspect of Pride. And I also feel like the colours of the trans flag really lend themselves really well for space age fashion, because the colours have quite a lot of contrast. So I drew up a few similar designs. I knew I wanted it to be a cropped shirt, no sleeves with a high collar, so all the designs have that. And then I started drawing a squiggle down the shirt, and that really stuck out to me as an element I really wanted to include. So I moved more and more towards that until I got my final design, which is the one that's circled in this video. Fabric wise, I really didn't want to buy anything new for this project. I wanted to repurpose old fabric and old clothing. So I repurposed a pair of shorts that I'm not super happy with, the mesh that I cut out of my last project, and some blue fabric that I have left over from a cosplay project. All the fabrics are very different from each other, they all stretch very differently, they all have different textures, but I feel like this adds something to the final design that I really like. It just means you have to use slightly different techniques while sewing. Starting out with the squiggles that will go down the center of my t-shirt, I took one side of the shorts and drew out some sort of design that I wanted. For this, I didn't want it to be very uniform, as I felt like this would give the shirt more of a factory made aesthetic rather than a repurposed one. It's also just really difficult to make organic shapes identical, so if I had wanted them to be the same, they wouldn't have ended up identical anyway. I also drew this on the wrong side of the fabric, as this is the side that I'll be sewing onto. It's also the side that you won't see in the final result, and obviously I don't want this pen on the outside of the shirt. Next step was sewing these squiggles into place. For this, I used a very small straight stitch on my machine and just traced along that line that I'd just drawn. This is a technique I've been perfecting recently, with the hope that one day I'll be able to use it to create an entire piece of clothing. This project is definitely moving in that direction, with it being the main focus, but it still isn't the base layer of the shirt, so I'm not quite there just yet. In doing this technique so often, I have been getting better at it, and I do have a few tips if you want to try out this sort of fabric manipulation yourself. Firstly, you want to use a non-stretch material. It is so much harder to get a good curve that doesn't warp this fabric if it stretches. So fabric like this one, which is a fleece with no stretch, works so much better for this technique. Secondly, you want to use a fabric that you can iron. These pieces look so much better once they are ironed flat in the end, and some fabrics can't be ironed, mainly ones that are very high in plastic content. So using fabric that can't be ironed really limits the potential of this technique. And thirdly, you want to cut notches into the seam allowance all the way along the shape. Even if you think an area doesn't need any tension release, it just comes out so much cleaner in the end if you cut a lot of tension notches into it. With the pink pieces now finished, I then went on to adding the white strip down the middle, and for this I used a see-through fabric because it feels a little bit more space age and a lot more fun to me. This piece couldn't be sewed onto the pink strips outright because of how stretchy it is, and I don't own any stabilizers or interfacing, so I glued it into place instead. I've done this technique many times before and it usually works out absolutely fine. The only issue with it is that it makes the fabric much more stiff and much less breathable, but in this case the pink fabric already had both those qualities, so nothing was changed using this technique, so I felt like it worked really well for this circumstance. Once the glue was all dry, I then sewed these pieces together using a very big zigzag stitch. I chose a zigzag stitch so these pieces had an embroidered look to them that sort of mimics the thicker piping used in space age clothing, and I really like it. I feel like it looks better than sewing really close to the edge with a straight stitch, and I really wish I'd used this in other projects in the past. I think it especially works well here because the pink squiggles are such a big bold shape that they need a harsh edge to really highlight the curves of it, especially because I spent so much time making those curves. I really didn't want to hide them behind any stitching. It just really brought everything together for me. With the middle panel complete, I then went on to sewing it onto the base t-shirt, for which I used a very simple shirt pattern that I found in my stash. And once this piece was cut out, I used the exact same method I had just done to attach the pink and the white together to attach the pink and the blue together. At this point I could really see my vision coming together, and I was so excited to wear this final project. It is just a very me sort of piece. For the back and side panels, I originally wanted to use the white mesh on the outside, but I really struggled to sew the blue and the white mesh together, so I completely scrapped it and went with pink instead. And honestly, I feel like this looks a lot better because I get that really nice contrast between the blue and the pink that isn't really there between the blue and the white. I also attempted to make these look extra professional by ironing down my seams and also sewing down my seams, and I feel like this really does elevate this piece and make my sewing look a lot more professional. I do need to remember to do this much more with my project because I'm really bad at just leaving things unfinished. And this project really showed me that just finishing everything off makes me so much happy with the end result. At this point, I also sewed down the shoulder seams, which made this into an actual wearable shirt. With the base all finished, I then went on to sewing all of the hem pieces, starting with the bottom. For this, I used the waistband from the original shorts, plus a little extra at the back as I didn't want to stretch the elastic to sew it on, because I wanted to have a straight up and down result rather than one that tapered in. This was very easy to attach. I just sewed it onto the bottom of the shirt right sides together and then flipped it down into the correct position. I also ironed it down in case it wanted to flip up at any point, but it is quite a heavy piece compared to the t-shirt, so I feel like it's going to stay in place quite easily. Next, I moved to the top of the shirt to add on the collar piece. This is just a long folded piece of blue fabric that I sewed into a ring and then sewed onto the neckline in the same way that I did the bottom hem. I do wish I had made this a little bit thicker because it would have gone with my inspiration a little bit better, but I'm still happy with the size that I went for because it does mean that I can wear collars with this shirt if I wanted to, and I do tend to wear collars quite a lot. Finally, I added on the armholes in almost the exact same way, the only difference being that I stretch it slightly so it lays more flat with the shirt when I'm wearing it, and I also ironed and sewed the seam down in the same way I did for the side seams, just to keep everything looking a little bit more uniform overall. With that said though, this shirt is now finished and I can finally show you the final result. Overall, I am super happy with how this turned out. I feel like it really does come across as a trans flag. I feel like when you can see the blue through it, it doesn't look quite as much like it because it just looks like it's pink and blue. But when I'm wearing it, you can really see the white and it really does read how I wanted it to. It feels a little bit space agey, but not quite as much as I would like. I think that's mainly because I didn't do a very thick piping on any of the pieces. The only thick piece I used is at the bottom. I feel like if this was also the same width as the top and the sleeves, I feel like it would just look a little bit more space age. I just want to make it a little bit more overt the next time I try it out. I will say it's also a little bit difficult to put on just because this bit at the front doesn't stretch at all. So I do have to remember not to put my makeup on before putting this shirt on because otherwise it will completely ruin it. But I do already have a few shirts like that, so it's not that big of an issue. But yeah, that is it for my thoughts on this project. If you did enjoy it, please give it a like down below, comment what else you'd like me to do, and subscribe as I post a new video every single week, and I'd love to see you again. But until then, bye!